Hey everyone, welcome back to IT Horror Stories with Jack Smith. I am, as always, Jack Smith, and across the virtual table, across the pond, I have Kayne in front of me. Hey sir, how you doing?
Thanks for having me on the show today, Jack. I'm super excited to be here and to talk about some horror stories.
What's in the name? That's what we do. Very welcome.
Exactly.
Go ahead, sir.
Fantastic. I think if anybody wants to know anything about me, my parents gave me tremendously poor OPSEC, so my name is Kayne McGladrey. Yell into any hive of bees or ask any LLM, and you will find out more than you need to know about me and some of my background. But I am super happy to talk about something that most people, I don't know, we were talking a little bit before the show, and I want to talk about a company type that nobody would think of as a target. Because these days, we focus on these breaches of these glamorous high-tech companies. We think about the damage done to hospitals. We think about critical infrastructure. CISA's coming out and saying, hey, we're going to help your critical infrastructure be more resilient. And that's neat and all, but that's not the conversation for today. I want to talk about manufacturing. And I don't want to talk about just any sort of manufacturing. I want to talk about cardboard. Because if you look around your house, if you look around my house, if you look at what my cat has, he loves his cardboard boxes. And there's only one way I get cardboard boxes, the same way one of your listeners gets cardboard boxes. We get stuff shipped to us. And like we were talking before the show, this is an industry that is surprisingly profitable, right? They take wood and wood pulp and they turn it into boxes, and all the suppliers have to buy boxes to send us stuff. And what that means in practical terms, they have to have high uptime requirements, because if they can't make cardboard boxes, my cat doesn't get a new box every week.
Yeah. I want to put in that indeed, as the entire paper industry is reshuffling, nobody is doing glossy magazines anymore, or only the very high kind. So that paper is just going out. But as you said, everybody is ordering stuff everywhere from all the Amazons and the eBay and the whatnots in the world. So yes, absolutely. Something stupidly looking as cardboard, it's everywhere.
Yeah, and I want to kind of go into a little more detail here as we get into it. Like manufacturing, if you go read the industry reports, you read your Verizon DBIR, for example, or maybe you go read Google or whatever. Manufacturing is always covered as a sector in all of these industry reports, and it has been for a number of years. And the company that I'm going to be talking about, they were in the crosshairs, and they didn't know what was coming for them, right? They had apparently no idea. And to kind of set up the scenario, so this was a few years ago. I can say it was in the past 5 years. I can say it was in the United States, and we'll say somewhere in there. The United States are kind of small. There's only a few of us around, so you'll probably guess it.
Just a few cities to go. Impossible to guess. Yeah,
pretty much just drive across the place one day. Anyway, the company, they had a classic IT team, and the IT team was, they subscribed to the alerts. Maybe they were getting the briefings. Maybe they were getting industry reports. We found out later they were getting FBI TLP white alerts. That's traffic light protocol white, which means it's something you can send to anybody, right? And it was about active ransomware campaigns that were targeting manufacturers. So the IT team, they had intelligence, right? And they were taking these and they were putting them into their risk register, and I can't say that they knew what to do with it. And the business, they certainly didn't know how to take any action on it either. And also in the lead up to this event, they also had an operations team, because this is manufacturing. They've got production lines. They've got toggle boards showing how everything's working. And so they've got this one production line that's making cardboard boxes, and it's just kind of running kind of slow. Like, they couldn't put their finger on why it was running slow. They just kind of knew, well, maybe it's a maintenance issue. And they had a long weekend coming up. They had a 3-day weekend coming up. And, we in IT or in cybersecurity, we know all the good things happen on the long weekends. Like, we all get to go to the beach, or we get to take holiday. The threat actors certainly wait till Tuesday morning to roll in. They would not want to wreck anybody.
All the fun starts Friday afternoon for everybody.
And that's kind of how this one goes. Super important. Yeah. Those two teams, they never talked. IT and OT, no communications path. They never met. They sat in separate buildings. They were under different org charts. From a structural failure, if I think about it very early, they never chatted.
That's a perfect storm waiting to happen. It does actually sound extremely familiar. So it gives me a bit of the soothing feeling that I'm not alone in this, which is excellent. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think a lot of your listeners who are in manufacturing, or actually most industries, will go, he's talking about us, isn't he? He's not. Yeah, this is not a cardboard story. This is just a story.
It is the that big blue box in the warehouse that's beeping all the time with the network port that we are not allowed to touch because it's someone else's. That one.
Yeah. And so the only other thing I want to cover down on before I get into the real horrors of this is, so I was running executive advisory. I've done executive advisory for years now on 3 continents. And I was doing executive advisory work at a consulting firm. And our CEO, it's late Friday night, and he gets a phone call from a golf buddy. And that's how this whole thing kicks off where I get involved, is like somebody he plays golf with on the weekends calls him up. So this is not some like formal intake process. This is not some well-structured security program. This is a personal phone call at night. Well, yeah, and I think that should probably help your audience understand like just how unprepared this company was for what was going to come into them and what it was happening. Like, it still blows my mind because the CEO called up and like he thought it was just rescheduling the golf game. Like maybe later on Saturday, maybe we'll wait till it warms up. No. That was not what was going on at all. So getting into it, I already said that the FBI had been warning folks in the manufacturing sector and that IT had known this was a problem and that the OT team knew that something was wrong. But the business team, the people who were actually in charge of making sure cardboard boxes got to their customers and the supplies got in, they had no idea this was not happening. Like they just knew that some production line was falling over and maybe it was making a noise, but neither side really had any vocabulary even, I think, to start talking about this. And so the way that phone call goes, I wasn't on the phone call, but there was a message on the computer screen, right? That's the whole details. There's a message on the computer screen, and there's this weird thing called Bitcoin that they'd like, and they can't do anything. And it seems like a lot of things are stopping. And this was not just in one production facility. This was in all of their production facilities had just kind of stopped. And it was an unplanned outage. And the people on the third shift were not very happy about it because they were planning to come in and, make cardboard boxes. And they were expecting a production slowdown, but not a production stoppage. So the other thing, in addition to this coming in as like there's this note on the screens that everything's stopping. So we get the phone call from the CEO and we're like, cool, it is Friday night. We're going to start assembling a team. We managed, because they had a local office to us, we managed to get boots on the ground, I think early in the morning the next day. And when I say early in the morning, like dark 30, like really early in the morning the next day.
Drop everything, get over there.
To figure out what kind of happened. Yeah. And so we had multiple teams working with the client at that point. We had the incident response team. We had my team. We had the client's legal team. We had our own legal advisory. There was also our sales team was part of this because we didn't have a formal agreement with this company. Because again, it's a golf buddy. Like it's not a formal, hey, we are on retainer. We're your paneled insurance, like chosen. No, we were just friends of a friend. Like, okay, that's neat. So they had to also figure out how to land all this contractually. And so the IR team starts digging in. And I start digging in just to, orient ourselves. The first thing I find out is the IT's got a risk register. Well, that's cool. They've got a risk register. And we know what should go in a risk register is they should have like, here are the risks that we have for the business. And the challenge was the IT risk register was made by this one IT guy who had went to a talk and heard about risk registers and decided that Excel was a really good risk register. And that's classic, right? But the other thing is that it never went anywhere beyond Excel. Like the IT team would look at it, and that was all. The business team had no idea. Their risk prioritization was kind of funny. I think their risk scale, like low risk tolerance to one person I talked to was $10,000, and low risk tolerance to somebody else I talked to was $100,000. And then I had a chat with CFO, and like their low risk tolerance was like $500,000.
At least it fills in the KPI of having a risk register.
Well, they didn't. It was only in IT. I'd like to frame it like internally. They didn't have a business risk register. This was just like, it felt like it was meant to be a compliance exercise, but this definitely was not risk management practice.
As long as all the boxes keep shipping out, we're okay. Yep, I love the mentality.
Exactly. And they really, when I think about it, the reason that this went down and why they were in a production stoppage, they hadn't built resilience because they hadn't really had the language or an ability to characterize risks. They had a backup paper provider in case things went wrong, and they had a place that they could get spare parts for their machinery. But that was sort of it. And so IT, OT, they never talked. It wasn't because there was some like personality problem. It's because they didn't have a shared definition of what risk means. And so when we've got like all this intelligence going on, and then we're looking at these symptoms, we can go, this is kind of a predictable outcome that there's a ransomware attack happening. And the threat actor had not only locked all the terminals, they had also allegedly locked all the files, and also they said they had exfilled a lot of those data. So they had managed to steal all of this interesting information from a cardboard manufacturer. And I can't get into some of the specifics around what sorts of things they're going to have, but you can imagine there's going to be some suppliers listed. There's going to be some customers listed. There's probably going to be, if you have an on-premises HR system, hypothetically, you'd have a lot of personal information around.
There could be allegedly a lot of personal information lying around randomly.
Hypothetically. It
might be possible. Yeah.
We choose not to have any subscription model nor sponsoring in order to keep our stories accessible for each and everyone. To support us, please check our merchandise at shop.ithorrorstories.eu or buy us a coffee at ko-fi.com/ithorrorstories.
As well, the run rate of their facilities is about $1 million an hour. So if you're not making cardboard boxes, you're losing $1 million an hour. So even though we dropped on the ground at dark 30 from a phone call that came in at like 18:30, 19:30 or so,
that's $6 million down the drain.
You're still losing cash, right? They were not happy about this. And like I said, I was starting to lead the executive advisory on this one. And that meant my role was between our internal incident response team and the client's legal team. And my role was, I really had two priorities. One was to make sure that we had legal privilege. And if your listeners have never heard about that, I could talk about it. But the other thing I had to make sure was that our any artifacts that came out of the IR process, that those were being contained and being disseminated, being shared appropriately. The last thing we wanted to do was to have a breach of secrecy at that point. And for your listeners who don't know what attorney-client privilege is basically goes like this. If an attorney sends you an email and it says ACP at the top, or this is under attorney-client privilege, please don't forward that email. And also be very thoughtful about what you're saying. And it's not a magic spell. You can't just go, well, I'm a little guy who works in IT, and I heard this podcast with Jack, and I thought that I could just invoke ACP and everything would be cool, because we're not attorneys, right?
No,
but if you're talking to an attorney that's under attorney-client privilege, the idea is that you're going to limit those communications paths. So I'm coordinating, I'm herding the cats between the IR, who's trying to figure it out, the legal team. We also brought in a ransomware negotiator as well to start managing communications with the threat actor, because they had set up a comms channel and kind of standard things that you go to do. And our head of IR, head of incident response, was actually, how can I describe it? He was an active red teamer. Also, he was a veteran. I won't say which branch of the services he was in, but he'd done some interesting things in some interesting places around the world. And so his team was not only leading IR, but he was also leading the eviction under a classic idea of like, hey, if we're able to detect everything they've got and figure out how much of the story because the threat actor is always going to talk a good game. They're always going to big up what they're saying.
There is one term that you might need to explain a tiny bit. Yes, a red teamer. I know what it is, but maybe not everybody does.
Red teamer would be offensive security. That means that they get paid to break stuff. So if you think about all the conversations we have these days about, Claude Mythos or OpenAI's Daybreak or any of the works that James Kettle have done or that Provost have done, it's that idea that you can break software for money. The AIs are going to be doing that now with some prompting from red teamers. But the idea really is that you're able to figure out what an adversary would do. And so we were fortunate in that our lead of IR had done work like this against hypothetically state governments, hypothetically in non-American nations that hypothetically we might have not liked at the time. That's about as good as I can describe it.
Well, it's a very, very short list.
Yeah. There's not that many places that are in trouble. So what we found out, and again, this was me hurting attorney-client privilege and managing all the comms channels. The attackers seem to be kind of new at it, right? Like they'd set up command and control infrastructure for being able to operate their ransomware and being able to have what they believed were secure communications with us.
All right. Yeah.
But what turned out was that their infrastructure, they didn't really do a good job of securing their own infrastructure, the threat actor. And the other thing that really came out early on in our investigation was they talked a really good game. They said about how they had multiple points of entry and how they, ransomwared all the files and that they'd stolen everything and that everything was encrypted. But we found they really hadn't moved fast enough laterally. So, they hadn't encrypted the backups. That is a common strategy these days among threat actors that know what they're doing. You encrypt the backups.
It's an easy rollback, and there you go. Close the hole and restore. Yeah, indeed.
Exactly. The other thing that they did, which sometimes still happens these days, but it was interesting, was, you ask for a proof of life. You ask, prove me that these files that you say you've encrypted are real files that you've encrypted. And so they gave us and also any files that you've exfiltrated that are really as valuable to us. So they gave us some key material, and they gave us a program to run to be able to decrypt an on-premises file. We were able to validate at least what the file was. They also sent us a sample of something they'd exfilled, and we decrypted that too. And it really wasn't as valuable, I think, as they'd thought.
Okay.
And the other thing that really came out as we started looking at it, because now we've got a copy of the decryptor, we can see what the key material is sort of looking like. They also only had one additional backup layer of persistence. And so normally when a threat actor gets in, typically what they'll do is they'll establish multiple paths of persistence so that if you evict one of them, like maybe they've got one administrator account. Well, you want to make sure you've got two administrator accounts, not just one. Maybe they've got in through one of your network layers, but you've got multiple network layers, so you can just turn off the network port, right? This threat actor had only had one layer of persistence. I can't say what it was. It was interesting, kind of innovative. But we had a pretty good degree of confidence that we were able to throw them out. So about midday Saturday, we get a message from the IR team. And remember how I said the threat actor hadn't done a great job of securing their key material, their infrastructure? Yeah. So they didn't know, because we had offensive security people on our side. We were in their infrastructure trying to figure out what was going on, and we found the key material. So the decryption keys for literally everything, it wasn't exactly a passwords.xls or a passwords.txt type situation, but darn near.
Still, you could, if you know where to look, you would pick it up.
Yeah, we were able to figure it out where it was, and that's not a celebratory moment. We had to have all of these factors come together and some good luck to find the key material to know, okay, so we're working with a threat actor now who sort of kind of knew at this, they're talking a good game, but they're not for realsies. And we've got a high degree of confidence that we can see all their entry paths and all their exit paths. And now we just got the way to be able to decrypt all of our files again. This is a challenging moment because you've got a ransomware negotiator who's trying to manage their expectations and trying to talk them down and trying to complain about how cardboard doesn't make any money, which I think we established at the top of the call. Boy, it makes a lot of money. But as soon as we figured out,
they don't know.
That's the thing. They kind of knew what they were doing. It looked like there was money here, but they thought it was some other type of manufacturing, not just cardboard. But once we had everything together, we put together an internal call and said, look, here are all the facts. Right? We laid out every single one of the facts. The company did not have cyber insurance, so cyber insurance was not in there, but their external counsel is in there, their CEO, our CEO, the two golf buddies from the
golf buddies. Yeah.
They were there, right? We had our head of IR. We had me running executive. We had pretty much everybody there and said, look, these are the facts as we know them. We have a high degree of confidence that right now we could pull the chain and evict.
Yeah.
But we can't tell the ransomware negotiator this. We've got to keep them on the phone long enough, right?
Yeah.
So we made the call of look, the ransomware negotiator is going to be on the chat. right? But as soon as we started pulling the eviction chain, we start removing their accounts and we start running the decryptions, that's when we go straight full hard.
When you said the ransomware negotiator, was it yours or theirs?
They had theirs, we had ours. So there are two sides, right? The attacker's ransomware negotiator was not very happy about like what was happening. They started saying they were getting messages from their internal team that there was a problem. And again, it's like, I think at the beginning we started out polite, but then we just gave the authorization, like, just start rickrolling them at this point. Like anything, any funny memes you want to throw at them, you go for it. Right.
Did you put in the fright take my money already as well?
I won't say which memes and GIFs we used. I'm a big fan of cat GIFs, so I may have added a few to the chat. There may have been something of cats on keyboards and things involving fires. But the ultimate thing is you know the ones I'm talking about, right? Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But the good news is we didn't pay a ransom, right? There was no ransom paid, and we had to keep a lid on literally everything so we didn't have a public event.
This podcast features Jack Smith and guests. We say thank you to our Demoscene friends who helped making this podcast possible. Commander Homer for editing, Danko for music and audio advice, NetPoet for additional voiceovers.
The other thing I think that worked to our advantage, I said this happened on a holiday, right? It was holiday weekend, 3-day weekend. So operations, because we got them out mid-Saturday-ish, Saturday evening, I'm not sure, time is a flat circle sometimes. We were able to get the decryption rolling, and the operations were able to come up fast enough so that the plants came back online. I think the downstream customers had expected there'd be less cardboard made because people would take holiday, right? So there maybe be some less people in the plant.
Yeah.
But you think of the normal things you get in a ransomware. You normally get regulatory consequences. You normally get lawsuits, right? We didn't have any of that because we kept such a tight lid on comms. So from all external appearances, not a single darn thing. It was holiday weekend. And that to me, like, that's kind of the real scary bit is like, this was a near miss. And I think ultimately, like, they didn't learn from it.
Well, of course not, because it was fixed and there were no consequences.
Exactly. And we went on later I mentioned the sales team and set up a contract with them. They weren't interested in additional IT services.
Of course not.
Clearly we just have to phone the CEO and provided you two play golf together, all good. Right? At that point, we decided, cool, we will not be taking any calls from this customer again when the next thing happens because we don't want to have. If this is your attitude, like, cool, we don't have to spend any money on security, we'll just fix it after the fact and hope that we get lucky.
Hey man, I'm very happy to charge you the hourly rate times 2.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think the kind of to bring it to a close for your listeners, the stuff that I really think about, the first one is that, and you even caught this one, Jack, like if there's a risk register that's just in IT, that is not a risk register. That is risk characterization's a business function. Even though, like, all of us are told we're CISSPs and we're supposed to be risk professionals, no. That is a business function. It is not a technology function.
True.
Second thing, and you also hit on this one too, if you don't have comms between your IT and your ops team, do not try and put those in place during an incident. Right? Like if you're not testing your incident response plan and figuring out how is everyone going to communicate, or if you're getting ingest of signals like those TLP whites from the FBI, or you're seeing weird things happen in your environment, if there's no communications path for your folks to talk, you're going to get outcomes like this. And then at the same time, like if you don't have telemetry set up, and having telemetry set up where you can review what's happening and also have a way of rolling it back and playing it back, and you could say that's a SIM or a SOAR or whatever. Don't care about the technology. Do you have that capability? Can you play back what has happened? That was something this company did not have. Like, we had to reconstruct attack paths using some fairly interesting network techniques to figure out like how things were happening, because there was no SIM, there was no SOAR, there was no telemetry. They didn't put any of that stuff in your standard things that you'd use to figure out what had gone and happened. Final thing I'd say?
So There is one thing in like the unholy triangle of IT gone bad. You mentioned IT, you mentioned OT. I didn't hear shadow IT.
Thankfully, that one didn't come up in this case.
Okay.
I will say in other investigations that I've been involved in, that has been pretty much the means to an end for a attacker. In this case, we didn't get involved in shadow IT.
It is the story of the fish tank in the Vegas casino. Exactly that.
Yeah. But I think the ultimate thing that I always think about this one is how lucky they were. And it's weird to say, like, you got ransomware and that's a lucky break. But think about it. Like, the attacker had one path of persistence. That's a lucky break right there. Like, us finding the unsecured key material. How often do you hear a story where the attacker just leaves the keys to the kingdom laying around, right? Or having it happen during a holiday weekend where we expected the client would be shipping less product, right? Or my favorite out of all this, like the way this came together, a golf buddy calls you up and says, hey, right? How many of us have that friend who we can call and say, my company is losing $1 million an hour because of a ransomware. Can you send some folks? Like, this whole incident was the survivability here was based on luck. It was not based on strategy.
Oh, no, it is very typical. I think jumping back to our first episode, first data center fire, that was a complete data center fire, a complete total offlineness. Luckily, no data loss, but very offline. Global Transport Organization, when did it happen? New Year's Eve. It's always the single best day where your entire operations is at a standstill, or you can shove it under the rug. That's when that happens, and nobody has to find out.
And I think that's something that we can be thankful for when it happens, but at the same time, we have to be aware that's not a good business strategy. And if you've seen everything in the news in the past week, where it seems like every day we're getting a new supply chain vulnerability or a new Linux vulnerability, right? Or a new
those have been popping up like
choice,
mad.
Right? Yeah, those are happening every day now, and I think that's going to accelerate. I think all of the supply chain downstream of the single cardboard manufacturer, right? How many people would not have got whatever they bought because this manufacturer was single source for a lot of companies? Like, their customers only had like one or two people they could buy cardboard boxes from ever. And that would have had knock-on, like, not Jaguar Land Rover level effects on the economy, but it would have been noticeable enough to enough companies. I think we're going to see a lot of companies really needing to invest in business level resilience, so that if some key supplier, whether it's a software supplier or a manufacturing supplier, goes and has an incident, that they still have to be able to conduct business.
Yeah. So on the close down, I have one final question is that I see a lot of small businesses here where you have one employee that makes an application in his spare time, basically sells it to his employer and sells it to 3-4 other companies in the business, starts his own little shop out of that. And when you find out it's still made in VB6 or an old .NET, and he just keeps on doing it. And you cannot really afford to air gap the machine that the thing is on. That's where my hair on my back stands up from. If I see that during an M&A merger, acquisition, or during a refresh, or just even a network audit where you just see the thing come back. This is an old Netgear unmanaged hub, and behind it is a Windows XP machine.
It's I'm not sure. Just briefly, you reminded me of an M&A, but hold on. First thing, I love that you mentioned VB6. That means that a human wrote it, because there's no way an AI LLM is going to go pick VB6. They're going to pick whatever more esoteric language exists that's being hyped on Stack Exchange right now. The other thing I'd say is that I was in an M&A that was kind of in your neck of the woods, actually, of a construction company buying another construction company, and we did that exact motion of finding where all the technology bodies were buried. And what we came back to is, like, anybody who's been through the acquired part of M&A, you de-invest in your tech stack. So they had things like that, and construction is not known for their high security protocols at the beginning. And our ultimate advice we gave them was like, look, you can buy the heavy equipment, print out all the material you need, and it's so good you've got access to industrial shredders because that's where we're recommending you put all of the IT equipment. Just have some fun, dump it on in, then make sure you dispose of it responsibly from an ecological perspective, but do not keep any of this equipment because it was shelved. It was just poor show.
No, don't leave it on the shelf because you'll risk using it one Saturday at 3 a.m. if you need a spare.
Absolutely, Jack.
All right, Kayne, sir, thank you very much for sharing this, and thank you for tuning in to IT Horror Stories with Jack Smith. Now, as a reminder, you can find us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Deezer, and wherever you find your podcasts. We upload episodes. It's season 2, multiple times a month now. Yay! We have merchandising, shop.ithorrorstories.eu, and everything else. Social media, we have Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Mastodon, and some others. You can find everything on links.ithorrorstories.eu. Kayne, thank you for tuning in, sir. Appreciate your time. And you, don't forget, you are one of us.
Thank you, Jack. Have a great rest of your show. And I'm so glad to see you made it to season 2.
Yeah, happy to be here.
The content of this podcast is intended for entertainment purposes only and is meant to humorously explore various tech-related situations. Any resemblance to actual events or real persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. We ridicule situations, never individuals or groups. Listener discretion is advised, and we encourage everyone to approach technology with a sense of humor and an open mind.